Everybody get up, it's time to slam now. We got a real jam going down. Welcome to the Space Jam, A New Legacy. Hello everybody, I'm Dan Murrell here with my review of Space Jam, A New Legacy, which is in theaters and on HBO Max now, at least here in the United States. If you're in different countries, it may be available in different places. Check your local listings. And before we even get started, I have a confession to make. The original Space Jam is a beloved film amongst many people of my generation. I was 13 years old when the first movie came out, but I have to confess, I never shared the love for that movie that so many of my peers did. I saw it in theaters when it came out, and I remember thinking it was fine. Maybe that was my first indication that I was going to go into being a critic when I grew up, was that I just didn't really like Space Jam that much. The Pulp Fiction joke was kind of funny, but it was kind of amateurish. I didn't really laugh that much. And so as I got older, I always thought it was so weird to see this cult grow up around Space Jam, because in my mind, it was a not very good movie with a really good soundtrack. And that's about it. The sequel to Space Jam, which has been in the works for nearly 3 decades, stars the modern-day equivalent of Michael Jordan, who starred in the first film, and that is basketball superstar LeBron James, who did grow up loving that first movie like so many other people that are around my age did. The sequel is directed by Malcolm D. Lee, it's produced by Ryan Coogler, and when you have those names attached to the film, I walked into the movie hoping that it would have this kind of subversive quality that so many of the Looney Tunes things do. That's one of the things I've always liked about Looney Tunes when we're talking about animation. I liked Looney Tunes cartoons when I was a kid way more than I liked Disney cartoons, because I thought that Looney Tunes cartoons had that edge to them, that self-aware winking nod, that subversive edge. It's something that I was hoping would be in this movie, and sadly, I was not able to find. We opened Space Jam: A New Legacy back in the late 90s on a young LeBron James who at the time was just an aspiring fan of Warner Brothers intellectual property, but he learns that he has to throw away the Bugs Bunny video games if he ever wants to achieve his dream of becoming an NBA superstar, which of course he does. Fast forward to present day and we meet LeBron's movie family, and one of his kids also has an obsession with video games. He wants to build his own video game called Doom Ball, but LeBron, ever the stern father figure, says, "No, son, I'll have no fooling around with this video game stuff in my house because you're going to be a basketball superstar just like me." There's about 5 minutes of setup before we get to the real reason that this movie exists. We literally go to the Warner Brothers lot in Burbank, California, a wonderful overhead shot. When in Burbank, visit the beautiful Warner Brothers lot. And we delve deep into the Warner Brothers serververse, which is ruled over by Don Cheadle, a computer algorithm whose name is Algorithm. I'm not making that up. Algorithm runs Warner Brothers, which means that we have a major studio who's essentially run by artificial intelligence, emailing all of the executives with ideas of what they should pitch next. And this is a great setup if you wanted to have a real tongue-in-cheek look at the studio system. If Warner Brothers was interested in roasting themselves a little bit, maybe having a little bit of fun with their past failures, just talking about the modern state of blockbuster entertainment, maybe acknowledging their part in the studio system. This movie is not interested in doing any of that, however. It wants to appear smart without actually being smart. Algorithm tells the executives to bring LeBron James to the studio for a meeting. The executives pitch LeBron on the idea of scanning him into the Warner Brothers servers and mashing him up with all of the different Warner Brothers IP. And LeBron says the idea is just straight up bad. It's one of the worst ideas I've ever heard. Of course, the whole rest of the movie is scanning LeBron James into the servers and mashing him up with all the Warner Brothers IP. These lines would be a lot more funny if the movie wasn't actually making the mistakes that they're lampshading in this movie. You can make fun of the shallowness of the blockbuster, but then you can't go on and be one of those same things. This movie isn't a satire of an idea like an algorithm running a movie studio. It feels like the product of an algorithm running a movie studio, and all the lampshading in the world isn't going to make it feel any different. LeBron and his son Dom, who's the one that's building the Doom Ball video game, which is related to basketball, of course, are then sucked into the Warner Brothers serververse, and LeBron is told that he has to play Algorithm's Goon Squad in a game of basketball in order to escape the serververse. LeBron is then sent to Looney Tunes World to recruit his team, which right now only has one resident, of course Bugs Bunny, the last Looney Tune left in Looney Tunes World, and the two have to embark on an adventure across the WB serververse to find all of the other Looney Tunes and recruit them to be all-star basketball players once again. To recruit the Looney Tunes, conveniently, we do see so much Warner Brothers intellectual property, at some points even inserting characters into films that Warner Brothers has the rights to. And I have to admit, of all the different things I thought might be going through my mind as I was watching a new Space Jam movie, I never anticipated asking myself, did George Miller sign off on this? So kudos to you, Space Jam: A New Legacy. You sent my brain spinning off into new dimensions that I never expected. Now, with all of this mashing up of intellectual properties, I've already seen comparisons, and it's a lot of times from people that enjoyed this movie more than I did, of this movie and a movie like Ralph Breaks the Internet, or a movie like Ready Player One, saying like, well, wait a minute, critics were way nicer to Ready Player One and Ralph Breaks the Internet than they are to this movie, but they both have a bunch of intellectual properties in it. I wonder why that is. To me, this is akin to saying something like, oh, well, Battlefield Earth and Star Wars are both set in space during an intergalactic war, but for some reason, critics were way nicer to Star Wars. I wonder why that is. Well, the simple answer is that one of them was a piece of shit, and the other one was Star Wars. And to be clear, I don't think that Space Jam: A New Legacy is necessarily a piece of shit. However, I didn't like it nearly as much as I liked Ralph Breaks the Internet or Ready Player One, and it's not because of their similarities, it's because of their differences. Both of those other movies actually had something to say about bringing all of those things together. There was a reason for it. Ready Player One was about over-consumerism. It was about the fact that you're injecting too much cash into this gaming world. Ralph Breaks the Internet also had a lot of humorous things to say about bringing all of the Disney princesses together, etc. They actually had something to say about all of these things. Space Jam: A New Legacy is not a satire, it is a showcase. It is a showcase of Warner Brothers intellectual property as a way of propping up the storytelling, as a way of enticing people into seeing the movie. And if you enjoy that, if you just enjoy seeing all of these things that you know and love just thrown onto the screen, then that's fine. But it's not an equivalent case with other movies that have similar thematic things. This is a false equivalency that's used a lot to compare very dissimilar movies based on one commonality. And when we talk about film criticism and what film criticism is, that's one of the things that it is to me. It's breaking down, okay, these movies may look similar, but what are the differences? It's comparing things, it's contrasting things, it's talking about these things. That's film criticism. It's not painting one thing with a brush and just going, this is all the same. No, movies are not all the same. Full disclosure, not all of the humor in Space Jam: A New Legacy is related to intellectual property. There is a great MC Hammer, You Can't Touch This reference, some really fresh Matrix parodies that I haven't seen in probably 15 or 20 years. You also have a scene with Porky Pig that, depending on your perspective, is going to be objectively the worst or objectively the best thing that they've ever done with that character. I fell on the worst side, but I'm sure some people will be delighted by it. The movie culminates with the newly formed Toon Squad and fancy 3D animation, and the Goon Squad, which is made up of scans of existing NBA and WNBA players. So this is a very mighty team. They're not monsters like they were in the last movie, but they are forces of nature, and they do provide some interesting challenges for the Looney Tunes to overcome. If there is a highlight of the film, I would say it is when you let the Looney Tunes be the Looney Tunes, the brief visit that you have in Looney Tunes world, and then particularly the second half of this basketball game. That's where the movie really comes to life and has an actual spark. And not coincidentally, I think it's when it's the closest to what we know from the Looney Tunes. When you let these characters be zany and wacky and everything that has driven their popularity for the last decades, then you're gonna make a good product. Space Jam: A New Legacy is definitely a mixed bag, but when I look at it just kind of from a distance, I see a wannabe subversive movie that forgot the subversion. It wants to be a commentary on corporate cynicism, but it is instead an example of it. There was a lot of potential here, but I think this is really at best a retread of the first movie, which, as I mentioned, is not a movie that I'm a particularly big fan of to begin with. If you like the first Space Jam, then you're probably going to like this movie. If you didn't like the first Space Jam, then you're probably not. I'm sure that kids are probably going to love this film, and in 30 years, when the equivalent of LeBron James makes the third Space Jam movie, they'll look back at critics like me and shake their heads and say, what were they thinking? The same way that so many people my age look at the critics who poo-pooed Space Jam back in 1996 and said, those old fogies, they didn't know what they were talking about. Well, I'll be one of those old fogies then, and my guess is I'm probably going to stand by the opinion I have on this movie. The bottom line for Warner Brothers, though, is that when you are a multimedia supergiant the way that they are, when you want to create a world like this that has so many cameos of fan favorite characters, you own so many different IPs that you don't have to license them. And so I'm sure they saved a lot of money not having to pay other studios for the rights to show things like Mad Max, Austin Powers, Rick and Morty, Scooby-Doo, The Flintstones, The Gremlins, It, A Clockwork Orange, The Mask, Shark Tale, Looney Tunes, Game of Thrones, Harry Potter, Casablanca, The Wizard of Oz, The Matrix, Worlds of DC, King Kong, and The Iron Giant. And even without having to pay those license fees, they also obviously saved a bunch of money on extras, because for the entire 45-minute climactic basketball game, it looks like there's only about 40 extras in the background who are dressed as Warner Brothers owned characters, but they all look like they're in really cheap cosplay. They're like the Halloween costumes that you would buy at Party City on like October 29th. So with the money that you save on the characters and the money that you saved having to really do big outfits for a lot of the extras, it really is fortunate that they were able to keep the budget of this movie down to, let me check, $150 million? What the f? So it's not going to be a recommendation from me on Space Jam: A New Legacy, but if you enjoyed the movie, I understand why, and I'm glad you did. What did you think of the film? Are you planning to see it at home, or are you going to watch it in theaters? Let me know down in the comments below, and as always, thank you for watching this review here on the channel. I'm going to continue to bring you as many movie reviews as I can. They may not always be early, but I'm going to try to hit all of the big summer releases coming out, and then as we go into the next year, hopefully movies will keep coming out. We're seeing some crazy numbers start creeping up, but I'm hoping that the movie-going experience will be able to stay intact in a safe way. If you liked what you saw here and you want even more of what I'm up to, you can check me out on Patreon at patreon.com/Dan Murrell. And also don't forget about my podcast, All My Movies. It comes out every week. I talk about one of the movies off of my Blu-ray shelf. It's a lot of fun, and I really enjoy doing that show. Thank you so much for watching. Please stay safe out there, and I'll see you next time. Bye.